In a small village in the Isan region of Thailand, a young girl grew up in a household where her grandparents were the undisputed heads of the family. They were the anchors of every meal, presiding over a home filled with aunts, uncles, and cousins. Her grandmother lived by a rigid moral code. Whenever the local theater performed stories of unfaithful husbands, she would weep openly, using the performance to teach the children that true strength was synonymous with loyalty. To her, a man who abandoned his family wasn't just a failure, he was a person without a foundation. This wasn't a family built on modern status or wealth. Its structural integrity relied entirely on those traditional values of absolute devotion, creating a home that felt permanent and secure. The girl's father seemed to be the perfect extension of that foundation. As a rural health worker, he was the community's primary lifeline, spending his days treating the elderly and vaccinating children in villages across the entire district. He spent his evenings grooming his daughter for a similar life of leadership. He gave her books about history's most influential figures, people like Martin Luther King and Marie Curie, telling her that she was meant to be a person of significance who sacrificed for the greater good. But while he built a public image of service, his absence created a vacuum at home. To fund his increasingly expensive lifestyle, the mother was forced into the fields. She spent her days behind the family's prized water buffalo, her skin darkening and her health failing as she performed the manual labor required to keep the family afloat. The community saw a hero, but the family saw a mounting debt. The central pillar of their home was hollow, supported only by the quiet, exhausting sacrifices of a wife he was slowly abandoning. The secret life he'd been hiding eventually detonated. He had traded his career for a severe gambling addiction and a violent affair, resulting in a dismissal from the civil service that stripped the family of their remaining status. He then committed the ultimate betrayal of his own household. He secretly sold the grandfather's prized water buffalo, the family's most valuable asset and their primary tool for survival, using the money to fund his escape with another woman. As the father fled the wreckage, the grandfather stepped forward to defend what was left. The elderly man sat on his porch with a loaded shotgun, prepared to use force to protect his daughter from the man who had systematically liquidated their lives. When the primary load-bearing pillar of a family operates out of pure selfishness, the result isn't a slow lean, it's a violent collapse that leaves everyone underneath to sift through the rubble. The aftermath was a total breakdown of the household. The mother collapsed into a paralyzing, mysterious illness. The older brother fled the village to escape the shame, and the daughter, once the top student in the district, fell into a deep depression, her grades dropping as she faced expulsion for unpaid fees. They were on the brink of total ruin when an aunt arrived from the city. She was the mother's sister, a woman who had built a successful life in Bangkok and refused to watch her family disappear. She acted as emergency scaffolding, holding the family together while they were most vulnerable. She took the young girl into her own home to finish her education and rushed the mother to a city hospital, providing the medical care that saved her life. A family's ultimate survival doesn't always rest on the parents. Often it relies on the resilient backup support of the extended family, who refuse to let the structure fall. With her aunt's support, the young girl returned to her studies with a new sense of agency. The financial burden was gone, replaced by a clear path toward her own future. She decided to follow the path of the heroes she'd read about as a child. She chose nursing, a profession that allowed her to provide the medical care her mother had so desperately needed during the family's darkest days. She had spent her adolescence watching her mother suffer in a bed she couldn't afford to leave, powerless to help. By earning her nursing degree, she turned that memory of helplessness into a concrete skill, ensuring that she would never be a bystander to someone else's pain again. Years later, now a successful nurse with a family of her own, she was living in a new country and raising her second daughter. One afternoon, while looking at her child, she froze. Staring back at her was the exact face of the father she had spent her life hating. The same nose, the same eyes, an inescapable map of his features in the person she loved most. The resentment she'd carried for decades began to dissolve. She realized she couldn't continue to hate the very DNA that had been used to build her own child. The final resolution came at her grandparents' joint funeral, after they had passed away together following 70 years of marriage. Her father returned, asking for forgiveness. She gave it to him personally, but she told him his real apology belonged to the graves of the grandparents whose trust and land he had stolen. If a family is a house, it takes immense resilience to survive the failure of its primary pillar. But by relying on the true foundation of extended family, you can survive the collapse, forgive the past, and become a sturdy pillar for the next generation.